Welcome to the Cyber Call, the podcast by Ride of Boom for managed service providers looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Each week, we dive into the latest threats, trends, and real-world strategies to help MSPs protect their clients and grow their businesses. Let's build a safer, stronger community together.
All right. Welcome, and happy Monday. This is a big one. Gary, welcome back. It's been quite some time. Thanks for joining us. We got
Good
a lot
to be back.
Up on.
Absolutely.
Both. Let's start off with all your personal life, and then we'll progress into other things. Okay.
No, I had a nice summer, and I just got back from a week in Europe with my daughter, who's currently living in London.
Mm-hmm.
So that was super fun. We brought my little 1-year-old granddaughter with us.
Oh, you did?
So, yeah. So great family week, and now I'm ready to roll through the rest of the year.
Fantastic.
It's do you know what it is now? It's selling season.
It is selling. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah,
that is
it's
true.
selling season. Starting now to the end of the year for MSPs is the best possible conditions to bring on new customers at the right price. And remember, you can close a deal on December 31st. 2026 doesn't care when you closed it. You get 100% credit next year. It's the bonus round.
Yeah. Garrett, just real quick before we get it, do just a touch of banter. What's new in peer? What's the gut on 1,000 or so MSPs? What are you seeing? Good, bad, and different. What trends?
Yeah, well, I'm anxious. We're between meetings, so we're coming up the third week of October to our next in-person in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
I still see new logo sales are, as a group, like between 3.5% and 4% a quarter. I think that's really good. Profit margins seem to be holding. Churn up a little bit. But what I don't see, Andrew, is for all the work that's being done, and I think this is the same as other industries. We track tickets per month, per end user, and we track how many tickets get closed on average in a period per support desk rep. And we don't, all the work that's being done in AI, we're not globally seeing the efficiencies. We're seeing it in pockets. People that were early into automation, are starting to see tangible results, 10, 20, 30% reduction. But as a whole for the group, it hasn't come out the other end yet.
Got it. Brian, we'll intro you formally soon, but Gary made me think about something, with your, kind of insights into a lot of companies. AI, from a governance perspective, you read reports like the MIT report, and various types of information. The data would suggest that on the margin, AI deployments there's interest, there's pilots, but full-fledged, AI initiatives, not a ton of them. And then even with governance in place, so I have a two-part question. How much governance is actually being implemented? And it would seem the data suggests that even with governance, users really don't care. I'm going to use my personal tools and do my job anyway. So can you give us what your perspective on this is?
Yeah, there's no governance in place. We're not seeing it anywhere. It's just this is the shiny new object, right, for everyone. And corporations have been incredibly slow to adapt the enterprise version that they want to allow or enable all their users to embrace. So everyone's just like, yeah, well, I've got $20 a month, swipe my credit card, and I'm on ChatGPT myself, and I'm just going to dump all my data over here. So it's a DLP issue, right? And it's a control. It's going to be it is an access control issue that is basically happening just through the browser, right? Because it's not like it's an app you have to install. It's just a browser you need to interface with. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to solve it. We're definitely talking to people who are thinking about now addressing it because they're like, hey, listen, we want to give our users the ability to do this, but we don't want to see everything go out the door. So how should we approach this? while we're also trying to figure out how to wrangle the horse back into the barn, because everyone's swiping their credit card and just using whatever they want. And, we get clients and you get into conversations and they're like, oh yeah, we love Claude. We love OpenAI. Oh, I love this one. It's like, you're using like 6 different versions of stuff. How's that working out for you guys? Like it's nuts. Yeah, it's an interesting space, but yeah, nobody's adopted any governance. People start waving hands right now that like, I want to do the right thing. Let's do an AI assessment. Like, I don't have to walk in your organization. I'll tell you, you're going to fail. Like, you're pretty much just all the controls that you should be building. You need to just acknowledge that you need to go build that. Like, you're not doing any of it.
I got a question for Chris. Chris, bad guys, it takes them a little bit of time. They lag behind a little on things like this. But then once they get it dialed in, right? We've seen that over and over again. Do you see that's what's coming, that this will be the next big exploit?
Yeah, it looks like it's what's getting dialed in now. I mean, in 2 different kind of ways. Number one is the bad guys using the tools themselves to do things bigger, better, faster, smarter. And then taking advantage of the tools themselves. I mean, we've already seen reports where you can copy and paste prompts. Somebody says, hey, here's some stuff you need to do, and prompt and send it in there. Then there's some hidden text in there that people don't pick up on. And lo and behold, it's doing something bad. And the end user has no idea that's what's going on. Also, you just see that, the threat actors out there know that these people aren't putting controls in place around the data. So they know that a person that typically wouldn't have access to all the data through prompts and through poor configuration, boom, they can generate a prompt and get all the data that they shouldn't get, and the bad guys scoop it out. It's too easy. And, I'm with Brian on the governance side. I mean, I feel all this pressure that they got to do it or they're going to die, right? I mean, that's the only way they're going to be able to compete. They're going to be left behind. And at the same time, hey, you got to do it right in a secure way. It kind of reminds me of COVID, whenever they was trying to figure out, hey, how do we get people to have remote access? They didn't care how they did it. They just wanted to do it, and then they got bit by it. I think AI is worse at a larger scale because there's just more tools and more things available for people to try to leverage and install and subscribe to. It's it's moving so fast.
And I think it'll be a big gap, Andrew, like other things we've seen, until some technology comes. And you and I, like this week, we looked at something, right, in this category. But it's an early category. It needs a lot of evangelization. Like, that's years away from having like some mature leader emerge around, to an automated way to do the governance. So there's going to be a big gap in there. And when it's just a company, big or small, trying to use process as governance, we've seen them fail over and over again.
Yeah, just a few quick things, and I'll wrap this up. One is I kind of did a little bit of research. Now, this is off the cuff napkin research based on what the internet's saying, but astounding, Phyllis. ISO 42001, the first international standard on AI. They gave a figure. I'm like 40 or so, 40, not 400, not 4,000, 40 full certifications granted so far globally. Now, if that isn't a telltale sign on the interest level, that that's pretty.
You can round down. That rounds down to 0.
Right. I do have a question. You always ask me, would you create more controls because of AI? I've been thinking about agentic AI, and I have a question for Chris Lehr. I don't know if now's the appropriate time, but what do you think we need to be doing additional logging around AI?
Definitely.
It's going to be hard because it's going to be acting on its own. So you do need all those ACLs or IAM, all the things in place. And so, it has to have some autonomy. It has to have some privilege, but then it has to have boundaries around it. So it could be like really, really difficult.
Yeah, you're right. It is going to be difficult. And it's going to be one of those things where I think, especially with agentic AI and all the things that are going on, I think speaking from a legal perspective, it's going to be proving that it's operating normally and that it's not doing something that it shouldn't be doing. And really, one of the only ways to be able to provide evidence for that is through some method of logging. I don't think there's anything out there that's caught up to this yet to simplify that or to make sense out of the logging or anything of that nature. But it's definitely something that has to be addressed in order for you to, again, know that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I'll close it out with, I just posted something which kind of rounds out today, Chris. This was an interesting article, how these websites are getting spun up with AI, these AI platforms like Lovable and others to create these CAPTCHA fake websites, right? And, it would seem, right, from a social engineering perspective that, right, Brian, we want to make sure you're a human, and lo and behold, all that's doing is taking us to a phishing site. But these are being generated, really well architected through these AI platforms. So it's something that we're seeing, day in and day out, get the creative ways that threat actors are using this.
I joked, I did the keynote at ISSA last year, and I joked that attackers are the only ones who are realistically doing anything at scale right now. Like, everyone always is like, oh, we're gonna do this at scale. No, you're not. Like, look at what the guys in the Eastern Bloc are doing. Like, they are operating at scale. They know how to use tools.
Bad guys and porn.
That's true. They have a lot of smart people that have lots of time, and there's just so much money to be made without any taxes.
That's all you need. I mean, motivation, money, and time. Literally,
Chris makes us think. Chris, me and you.
That's right. Same thing.
We can roll up something together. You know what I mean?
All right, let me set the stage and let's get on into it. All right, so again, welcome back, everybody. So we're going to talk about something today. We really haven't talked a lot, I don't think, now we're in our 6th season, about a lot, and that's microsegmentation or network segmentation. We've talked about it here and there, but this topic of microsegmentation, something that, could be a game changer when it comes to ransomware. Obviously, Chris, this is something that, from a lateral movement perspective, you see regularly on, the kill chain and how things, operate during an attack. So I wanted to see if we could bring on an expert, talk about this, if this is something MSPs can, use at scale and operationalize. As always, we love bringing in folks that have significant industry background. And with that, Brian, welcome to your first time here on the Cyber Call. So tell us a little about yourself and what you do there at SideChannel.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. And good to be on with everyone. Always fun to talk about this stuff. Yeah. 20-something years in the industry. I started in the commercial world as an ethical hacker way back in the day before I got into the Army, and then worked in the DoD and the intelligence community for a number of years. Really excited about the direction that the DoD is actually going right now. So shout out to Kirsten Davies, who's about to be named the next DoD CIO. Really proud of what she's going to be able to go accomplish for the department and administration. Having come out of that space and that group exactly, I know what she's up for. So really just kind of believe a lot in like what the government's trying to do or what they need to do. And then conversely flipped over to be a CISO at a Fortune 500. So kind of saw the commercial side of things and kind of where they needed to go. And it's amazing how much each can kind of learn from each other. And I'll also tell you that neither has got it right today. So there's quite a bit of runway for both public and private to kind of do the right thing. And then, I launched SideChannel in 2019. We're predominantly focused and started out as a vCISO provider. We've grown it to be the largest vCISO provider in North America. In 2022, I actually acquired a technology centered on microsegmentation, and that's why I got really very interested in that specific thing. And won't go into like the tool and whatnot, but the reason for the acquisition and kind of building on that platform and offering that platform and then is because it seems like the pendulum swung and everyone's really good at detection and response. It's like, thank you for pointing out yet again, somebody kicked in my front door and is standing in my hallway. But what I want is somebody to actually lock the freaking door and stand behind it with a machine gun and make sure that, it's totally impenetrable. So I think the industry needed to see a shift. I just have been following kind of industry trends. Great that we finally latched on to detect and respond after so many years of thinking that firewalls and antivirus were going to save us all. But I think the pendulum needs to swing back and do a much more embracing the identify and protect side of the equation. As you know, I wrote a book on NIST, so I'm a NIST nerd. I'm big on, that parlance. But so that's where we're at. It's just, products and services, trying to help people do the right thing and in a way that they can financially afford it. Everybody in the Fortune 500's got big budgets, but there's 9 million companies in the US. They don't have big budgets, so they got to figure out ways to do the right thing with what they got. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's just honestly, it's kind of altruistic. But, that's an area I saw as really needing focus and attention out of the government. And as it says for Fortune 500, where my vendors, smaller groups and smaller companies trying to figure out, how to do the right thing. So, yeah, again, thanks again for having me on. This is great.
So what would be your target customer? What do they look like?
Yeah. Our clients right now are anywhere, largest is like 6-7 billion in revenue, smallest is $20 million VC-backed startups. But really our sweet spot and the ones I like to work with, 500 employees to 5,000, kind of that space right in there. They are
mid-market enterprise.
Yeah, what mid-market or insurance would call commercial, not really enterprise. And that's because they're big enough that they really, really should be doing the right thing, but they're not big enough to have a CISO to fully embrace somebody at the helm to lead a program. So like they're in this weird, growing phase where they need cost-effective help to kind of go do the right thing, but they can't get away with being like.
It's no different than an MSP who manages 500 to 1,000, endpoints. They're small. They can't mature in all the areas like they need. So it's the same thing. Those teams are exactly the same.
The exact same thing. And the other reason is that I saw that most MSPs and MSSPs weren't effectively delivering vCISO practices. And so that I saw as my business opportunity, right, to capitalize on. They're mostly focusing on, 24/7, eyes on glass, looking at what's going on the wire. But who's building the program that actually instructs what that should look like? Who's doing the training? Who's bringing everything that a full-time CISO at a larger organization would be doing in that seat. But look, starting salaries, $500,000, $600,000 on the East Coast. Mid-market companies not affording that. They can't justify it. So we built a way, and I built a method that allows us to deliver that actually at scale and tech-enabled. It's been a lot of fun. You get to see a lot of different problems and work with a lot of really great people. And, at the end of the day, our clients are better off than before they met us. That's kind of the goal of the whole space, right?
That's awesome. Well, Gary, knowing that you typically are one of those people with the eyes on glass doing the threat detection, I'm going to turn this over to Phyllis. So Phyllis, go ahead.
Great. Thanks for being here, Brian. So let's just start with the basics. Can you explain what microsegmentation is and how it's different from network segmentation?
Yeah, I think we have a new standard definition, and we can't just kind of take an old. So when you think about traditional networking, we're aligning it with predominantly hardware networking, right? Hardware-based networking, where it's like, all right, here's your Cisco, your Juniper, your HPs. Here's what your ACLs look like. Here's your world of pain in managing all of that. It's very, very hardware-based. I think the modern view of how do we adopt microsegmentation is one of software-defined networking. Right? We've got the reduction in on-prem infrastructure besides outside of data centers. Okay, you're not, servers and data centers aren't working from home. So we've got a predominant workforce that's out and about. You've got disparate, and multi-geographical, areas, and you've got data everywhere. You've got people everywhere, and you want to make sure that they are connected and secure. So the adoption and kind of the move towards software-defined networking, and we see this in a lot of different tools and variations, moving us to, the WAN or the edge or whatever we want to call it. So that's kind of, to me, when I talk about, microsegmentation now, it's about how are we doing it with more modern software-defined networking versus because hardware-defined, is, and microsegmentation there is just standard ACLs and VLANs. It's not magic. But the problem is that with hardware, it's difficult. It's more costly. You do need more resources and much more experienced resources to kind of manage those. And the software-defined tools that have come out in the last 5 years that I've seen that are good allow you to kind of get away with less experienced folks, much more easier to use tools, much better interfaces. You don't no longer do you need the CCIE and the 30-year curmudgeon to run your your firewall rules and everything. So I think that's the first thing. I run into a lot of conversations where people are like, well, we have a full Palo implementation here. How do we do microsegmentation? I'm like, I mean, the same answer I would have told you 20 years ago on how to do that. This isn't, unless you're going to buy a new tool overlay on it, but God, why would you do that? It's pretty straightforward. It's ACLs. It's very difficult and unwieldy to manage, that type of an approach. So that's what's been interesting.
Brian, just in case people out there don't know ACL, can you just give that quick?
Access control list. So, think about your OSI model, your TCP/IP model. What ports, protocol, services are you going to allow from what source to what destination, and in what direction, and at what times, right? So, like all aspects of control can be generally defined inside of an ACL or an ACL. An access control list on a firewall or a router or a layer 3 switch. So
I appreciate it.
What does this look like in the real world?
Sorry, I had Chris and Gary at the same time.
I'll ask it for him. He says, what's this look like in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, so now...
Yeah, exactly. Which, these companies are like all hybrid, 100%, right?
So it's relooking at, okay, how do we allow for this, right? Access. And the hardest part people want to jump towards first is the users. So they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm used to VPNs. So we'll just figure out how to do that. We'll VPN everybody back into something and then we'll manage it from there. The problem is that you need a huge pipe and a stack to be able to hold up and manage, backhauling everybody back in, which becomes very problematic. And somebody mentioned, what we were doing in COVID in 2020. I think the first 6 months, my company spent more time with our customers trying to tell them and explain to them and manage how they could be remote than anything else around security. And like most people don't even understand, like, what does that impact mean if suddenly we have like 1,000, 2,000 users suddenly going through this one concentrator, which was not designed for that ever. So what does it look like today? It's adopting these newer technologies or embracing more software-defined networking or SDN capabilities. Either it's, like I said, it's over a WAN, it's at the edge, it's whatever buzzword is now kind of being used for that. But there's plenty of tech that's out there that now enables you to go, hey, Andrew's allowed to, from his laptop, connect to those sets of servers over there. And that's it. And no matter where Andrew goes, if he's in the data center, if he's at a Starbucks, if he's, vacationing with his new best buddies on the North Shore or some, Gregorian Lake and in the Eastern Bloc, because he wants to find out if he looks good in orange, because he's changing over to the bad guys, and he wants to work from a beach there, he can. It doesn't matter. And you don't need, basically the idea is that the permissions follow the person or the asset, whether it's the actual device, like his laptop, or him as a user, or even, so there's non-person identity, the asset, the laptop server, or the person, Andrew, Chris, you, me, Phyllis. And then you've got system to system or asset to asset. So how do you make sure that the web page front end talks to the middleware, talks to the database on the back end? Those are still, need to be controlled. So wherever you go, those permissions kind of follow you. So the new way of thinking about it is that those permissions follow the person or the resource or the asset versus we set it. I hope to God it keeps the same IP as it does in 5 years from now, because if you change it, that permission is going to break and therefore the website doesn't work. Right? That's the flip side of it.
Brian, I'm going to butcher this, so I'm air quoting. It seems to have a very ZTNA feel to what you just described, right?
It does, right? So zero trust, right, as we know it, is not a tool, right? It's a concept, right? Microsegmentation is one of the things that are needed to make that concept a reality. When you look at the DoD or CISA, both of them did decent. I wish they didn't. I really wish those two organizations would just play nice and merge, but they want to keep, their own little sandboxes. So they developed their own 2 zero trust models for everything, right? DoD's got theirs, their 7 pillars. CISA's got their 5. And Phyllis, this is why one day I want to come work for you at CIS so that we can collapse all of these crazies into one standard. So everyone's kind of wants to get to zero trust. Microsegmentation is one of those ways to get there. It's not the only thing though. And you can't say like microsegmentation like is zero trust. That's not true. But it's one of the elements because there's a lot of things that go into like making a zero trust a reality for an organization. But yeah, and there's also a lot that goes into even being able to, you can't jump to microsegmentation day one, like out of gate. It's not going to be a day one kind of thing. Like you need, and Phyllis knows how much I love CIS. You need to do certain things first, like full inventory of your assets, your software, right? CIS controls 1 and 2. You need to do that stuff first because you can't defend what you don't know exists. You can't segment what you don't know exists first. So there's like stepping stones to even get to microsegmentation. And then from there, there's, embracing zero trust as a strategy. And then eventually, like, is that the way you want to run things? Yeah,
it is a change of thinking. I want to add, Brian, I think you said that earlier. I think for the MSP community, it's like, I remember getting in the MSP community and there's so many MSPs that were opposed to moving their clients to 365 because they charge for the Exchange server. They charge X amount of dollars per month to manage the Exchange server and all that type of stuff. And I think from, having conversations with MSPs, especially with all the firewall vulnerabilities, they just see like their life flashing before their eyes because they've been selling firewalls and the VPNs come along with that. And they've got all their customers. The customers have been running that way for 10 years or whatever. And they're so kind of, and you got to shake that loose. You got to shake all that loose and think of the network completely different. Think the way your clients are laid out. And then that's the only way you're going to be successful in thinking about these new concepts. And they're not even new concepts, but they're new concepts in this space.
Right.
But yeah.
I mean, yeah, SDN's been around for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Even when I was at the agency, we were,
Well, yeah, it's like MFA. You think that's brand new, and that was been around since the '90s. So, but it is that you got to think about it differently.
But it's true. You bring up a point, Chris, is like, what's the forcing function to make people care, right? So all these things have been around for a long time. We talk about MFA now because of all the attacks, that we hope can be thwarted by that. Same thing with the microsegmentation, right? Ransomware and so on and so forth.
Well, yeah. Well, let's just, hey, Brian, like the scenario, let's say just hypothetically in these cases where the firewall has had a 0-day vulnerability and the threat actor's been get in, and I would guarantee you 100% of those situations, microsegmentation was not put in place. If microsegmentation was in place, would the opinion be that the impact of, I'm not saying nothing would go wrong, but the impact, in my opinion, would have been far less for these companies that were victimized by the 0-day?
Yeah, well, let's. So there's an interesting piece that you kind of bring up in that scenario, right? And let's kind of make version 2 of that scenario. There's a 0-day in your firewall, and someone gets onto that, game's over, microsegmentation or not. Because if you're relying on your firewall and your router and your network infrastructure to create your microsegmentation, and your infrastructure alone gets compromised, you're done. It's over, right? Like that's the bad day of bad days. Kind of version 2 of that, where that plays out, where you're like, microsegmentation's in place, bad guy gets, establishes a beachhead on a database server, and from there can't go anywhere. Right? That's the ideal situation where like microsegmentation is like in. But when you lose infrastructure, right? Like that's why like forward operations in the US government, the only people who should be doing that legally inside of the US, they target network admins. They target network infrastructure because that is the keys of the kingdom, right? The database server over there in whatever countries, okay. But if I can find out who has, access to the network infrastructure at a telco, that's gold, right? That's so today, like what do we think about when we're trying to block, do the blocking and tackling? And that's the interesting thing about SDN is that infrastructure now doesn't exist. We're not worried about the 0-day on firewall or router or physical assets. because we've abstracted the hardware. So there's one less thing to worry about. Because look, firewalls are technically hardware and software running. So you have two attack surfaces you need to worry about. With software-defined networking, ideally you're abstracting the hardware layer, so there's no issues within the hardware itself. You still have the software, so you still have to keep up to date with, you know, whatever third-party, not open source libraries you're relying on, like everybody is for most of the stuff that they're building, you know, today. You still have to secure all of that, but at least it's one less thing. And I would actually say it's probably a lot easier to manage tracking if you're doing like SBOMs, software bill of materials. Sorry, I'm talking in acronyms for the audience. If you've got a full understanding of what, or the provider has a full understanding inside of their technology stack of, hey, I make a microsegmentation tool. I should know and be able to secure that tool so that all my users, you know, don't have to worry about, is that thing secure, right? Which, you know, anybody who owns Palo right now or Fortinet or Cisco is constantly worrying about, geez, is this device on another list this week?
Speaking of that, Brian, the last 3 years, Fortinet, SonicWall, Avanti, etc. It's been just one after the other. You know, with all the companies that you advise. And are you saying, you know, get rid of VPNs and you know, get to some type of other architecture? And if so, what are those conversations like? Because, and I'd love to get Gary into this, because this is this balancing act for MSPs, right? You know, if they could all flip the switch and get them into their clients into some type of ZTNA solution, that would be ideal, right? Because it's a week doesn't go by that we're not having some type of compromise.
Yeah, there's and to Chris's, you know, point earlier on, you know, MSPs are finding it difficult because they're making money off of the managing the firewalls and the licenses, and kind of weave into what you're going to ask Gary. Why not switch from that type of, you know, providing that type of service to a solution that allows for embracing a new way to do things? You know, if MSPs are unwilling to do what's right for their client, man, that's a huge problem, right, in and of itself. You got to be doing the right thing. If you're making more money over here, but it's at the, you know, creating an issue for your client, that's, you know, that's like a whole nother problem. But there is a way for revenue generation by adopting these new types of practices. You know, I very much believe that. I see that.
Well, let me just say, I don't think MSPs, I don't think it's a lack of because they're making money over here on this. It's what's the conversation look like? Gary, maybe you could take it in a better route.
Yeah. Look, I'll equate this to something simple. It's like, you know, why do the majority of MSPs, I'll say many MSPs, well more than 50%, you know, they don't have all their tools deployed at every customer.
Right.
And it's because they're not good at having that, you know, conversation, right? About MDR, whatever it is. And this is a whole nother way, like having this conversation is not easy for MSPs to sit down and, like, you know, you probably know as much about this as anybody, and we're 33 minutes in. Do you know what I mean? Talking through, setting the background, explaining it, and they have to get a talk track down. First, they have to be confident with the technology. They got to pick a platform, they have to deploy it, they got to get confident with it. And then from a VCIO standpoint, they need to go to their customers and say, hey, we're changing the way we do this now. But if they're going to do it, they need to do every customer. And they need to make it non-negotiable. They can't be in a world where everyone's doing something different. So it's a big challenge.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to you talk to one customer, you know.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to convince one customer, but to change your book, sure.
Yeah.
Andrew, your question is like, you know, what could they be doing kind of now? And, you know, would you honestly,
also, if you were an MSP, because you're doing the same thing, like, what would be that concise way that you would be talking to customers in a business way? Not talking to an IT director.
Yep.
They might be talking to somebody who's a C-level at a 100 user company.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, Brian. We talk a lot about the risk to revenue conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying over our last 5-6 years on this program is to have MSPs evolve their conversations out of technical and into tying, why they want to do something to the outcome of the business, the revenue, the things that matter to the executives business. That's what we're trying to get your mind around. And, like, how do you explain it? How do you tie something technical that has a risk to something an executive is going to open up a pocketbook and care about?
Yeah. That's why security exists. It's for the business, not the other way around. And, the way I talk to anybody, and if you're going to start embracing, software-defined networking and microsegmentation specifically, and as an MSP, if you're going to leave this conversation and go, okay, I can go do that, it would be this. You're telling your customers, look, we're going to reduce your capital expenditures on hardware going forward to zero, except for laptops, right? Like, you no longer need network infrastructure. You no longer need necessarily network infrastructure even in your data center. So you're reducing costs, right, for your customers. You're increasing their ability to work remotely if that's part of your company culture, be able to attract talent because you don't necessarily need everybody to come into one place. I think that's one reason we did really well with Side Channel, is because we've been a remotely native company since 2018. I don't have to attract everybody to move to Boston. Not everybody can. So you can attract better talent. So how do you enable and embrace kind of remote, workforce, where you can, where it makes sense, and then just speed to value on making changes. Changing anything inside of a software-defined network is much easier than a hardware-defined network. It's cleaner, it's easier to replicate. We have a client that's able to go from config A to config B in like clicks of buttons. So if you have like those types of needs, you can't do that in hardware. So if you're able to wrap, whatever that is, those concepts for your businesses, your business clients to understand, you're going to be in a much better spot. And that's how you're conveying it. All the while, as an MSP, you're sitting there going, wow, I just reduced my expenses I don't need as senior level resources internally to run this. I can have more junior level folks managing this type of capability for my clients. So I'm reducing my costs. Maybe I can reduce those costs in such a way that I pass those savings on to a customer. Now I'm becoming competitive in the marketplace to be able to even provide this. And you're also now offering a net new service or capability. You're not just going out with, hey, I've got MDR. And they're like, that's great. But again, can you lock the door? Right? And you're like, oh, great. I've got this symbiotic capability now. I'm blocking. And in case anybody does get through, I'm detecting and responding, and it's informing each other, right? So now you've got a net new service capability. So, I think, honestly, if I was an MSP or an MSSP today, and you weren't selling this or looking at this, just go work somewhere else, go do something else. Because this is the future of I believe how and what should be sold into the community. Because over the next 5 years, this is what's going to be demanded by clients. We're going to see it come out through regulation, which is going to force those clients to have to embrace this, which means they're going to turn around to their MSP or their other service provider and say, why aren't you providing this to me? Because those guys are, right? So it's going to become a forced differentiator in the space. And the proliferation of attacks alone are going to demand that we figure out better ways to do protection. And, clients are just going to be like, well, I had MSSPA and I got breached. I'm going to maybe start looking around and I'm going to switch over to somebody else, right? So that's what I see. Hell, we go into clients and they're like, we know you aren't an MSP, because we're not, but we have one. We're not really sure if they're good. Please come in here, build us a program and figure out if we keep them or not. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, they're not doing what you're paying for.
Yeah. But either are the next guys.
Well, I'll say there are, I don't want to cast everybody as a bad lot, and I don't want to also cast that everybody's doing it great, but there are some pretty decent ones out there. And I'll tell you, 5-6 years of being somebody who's not a provider trying to compete with those folks, but somebody who's stepping into an organization trying to make sure that I'm picking the right ones, I feel like I've got a good sense of which ones are good now. I've also gone through a lot of bad ones at the behest of my own company and some of our clients. We've seen ones fail. We've had to remove some, right? Sometimes at our own cost, because we're the ones who recommended those guys come in. But yeah, the whole space has got some work to do. There are no great and perfect, but They're not all, I don't think they're all bad. There are some decent ones out there that are doing the right thing.
I would also add to this real quick that if MSPs do move this direction, I think the user experience for the remote user is a lot better. I think there's steps in a VPN that are somewhat basically eliminated.
Yeah.
There's single points of failure that are eliminated. And just like Brian said, I mean, wherever you're at, where you're here, there, wherever, you're going to be able to log in and just work without having to jump through a bunch of hoops or do anything differently. So I think that's a big part of the messaging for MSPs and their clients.
But Chris, like in our space, the providers for this are pretty fragmented.
Yes.
And so it's almost like that has to, in our industry, that has to mature. You know what I mean? People will try stuff in the enterprise, but someone who's done it for a bunch of MSPs, like it's got to, that part has to happen for it to get to scale.
Yeah, for people to trust and adopt it and do it. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I'll tell you, being somebody who's on the front line of that, that is difficult to get that across. But once you do, you're like, yep, proved it here, proved it with this MSP. These guys adopted it. They're using it with clients. You know, you just need a couple past performances, or what we call in the government past performance, and, you know, things to look back on. But to Chris, to your point, adopting SDN, software-defined networking, and this whole concept, I absolutely believe it removes and completely takes out the need for VPNs going forward. Like, you no longer, you're now able to say, hey, listen, Chris, you're a database admin, right? And no matter where you're working, you and you alone from your asset are the only one that can touch that server over there and do database administration, right? There's no longer can anybody else go in there. This is you've seen this, right? Bad guy gets inside the environment, and every Microsoft server, unfortunately, and system acts like a file server because port 445 or sharing, right, is on. So you can hopscotch, if you can use that, kind of across an environment. If you adopt microsegmentation in a way through this, you eliminate that, right? File servers are the only things that are file servers. You're not able to bounce between laptops and assets and servers. You're not able to compromise one thing and kind of keep going. You do contain. It's the concept of, you know, like why doesn't submarines or boats like sink when one thing's, you know, punctured? It's because the inside of the hull is completely segmented and one thing floods, but the rest of it doesn't. So you have acceptable loss, right? Which sucked, but that's a interesting and kind of novel way to start thinking about it. But like, if I only lost like 2 laptops in this environment, could I do that? Yes, you can. Most everybody can. How you recover from that becomes something separate. But yeah,
we also, you know, talk about in this community around like the technical health and how, you know, we do have to kind of help with our workforce, and it's maybe sometimes hard to keep or retain the technical folks. And so, like, how big of a leap is it for an organization that has an MSP to train up folks, or how hard is it for these folks, given the tooling out there today, to implement SDN? Is this a new skill set they have to create, or have the tools evolved enough where it is pretty much easier today?
I think they have to have the resources today to do their regular networking and anything else that they have. They should have the skill set to be able to transition and start adopting and using this. And the other thing is, like, now you've got the ability to train people up on something net new. You're adding to those people's skill set, right? You're giving them opportunity to learn something new as well, which I always think is great. You know, that when you're thinking about your own workforce as an MSP, how do I keep these folks incentivized? How do I make sure they're not bored? Hey, let me train them on a new tool. Let me get them into something new. It's novel. It's interesting. But really, deep down, this is all just basic networking. So if like you lack that skill, you're not going to do. This is going to be a huge hill to go up and over. But you know, if you understand networking, if you're doing, you know, what an MSP, as I've seen, is capable of for their clients, this should not be a leap. You're just doing it a little differently, through a different interface, and you're just abstracting the need for hardware. I would think most network engineers, and that's my underlying background is network administration, okay, it's like, oh, this is a nice new way to do this. But it's not unlike how I would do this with hardware or ACLs, but you still need to understand ports, protocol, services, basic networking to make this work. Yeah.
Okay, good. I mean, I guess pass off to Gary now, or Andrew, did you have a comment or question?
No, I think it'd be great to have Garrick take a few and get to Chris.
Yeah. So we talked about the main question I had in terms of, how we translate this to business people. I think we kind of, touched on that. It's probably the most important thing. So I guess another question I would ask is, what are the biggest hurdles do you think MSPs would face trying to deploy this at scale? Knowing what's different about their business, that they don't have, 500 users, they have, 10 customers with 50 users,
Right. Yeah, I think if you've got different sectors, right, that you're working with, they're going to have slightly different needs on how to do networking. I mean, think about this from you've got 10 customers with 50 clients each, and they have zero networking in place whatsoever. They're basically like, hey, I'm starting, you have 10 customers that just came to you with, hey, I got 50 employees and I'm starting a business. How should I be set up? Right. So you're essentially trying to solve for kind of day one, right, for someone to build and put in place basically a new network, a new way to connect and allow for connectivity and access by your employees, but also potentially even your customers access, in. So being able to understand what that architecture should look like. You're constantly kind of in a 2B architecture kind of stance, and getting that idea across to the business could be difficult, because at the end of the day, they should see no difference in how they're connecting. So if they see no difference, they're going to sit there and be like, what did I just write this check for? Right? Why am I paying you now to do this? I didn't see anything, nothing happened. Right. And Chris will appreciate this. In the EDR world, that's a good thing, but it becomes very hard every year when you try to justify that retainer that nothing happened. And you're like, but that's what's supposed to happen. Nothing. That's why we are here. Same thing with networking, right? If you do a migration like that very well, there were no bumps, there was no hiccups. They're going to wonder, well, what's going on? So you need to kind of show that business or that client, how am I providing you the value here? Am I able to respond to your requests for adding new users or changing access faster? Am I able to provide you this service at a lower cost? Am I able to maybe tack on additional capabilities and value on top of, the new way we're doing things through software-defined networking that you're going to maybe pay for upcharge, right? Does this thing also make you stickier, right? I think that's something that we haven't talked about at all. Anybody can buy hardware and run hardware. You implement an SDN as an MSSP, you are sticky because you are the network now for their infrastructure, right? MSPs can get replaced. If I'm running on Palo, I'll get another Palo provider in here tomorrow, no problem. But if you're running on, this solution that we have and you're providing, an SDN that way, you become incredibly sticky. And that's good for the business, for you as the MSP. But how do you now use that to convey some type of real value and something back to that client? So they're like, oh yeah, this is why I'm with you. This is, I'm glad I'm doing, this with you. But those are the hurdles. It's that conversation. It's not the tech. The tech is easy. Because generally all of these solutions have the ability to kind of go in kind of a parallel mode. You're on hardware, you're in SDN, let's monitor, make sure everything works. Then we start flipping things over, to the other until everything is fully migrated, right?
Yeah, they can't price shop you on Amazon when you're doing it this way.
I had a couple more questions, but I'm just going to ask one more because I want to make sure Chris has time for his questions. So, every time we deploy a measure, bad guys deploy a countermeasure. We've seen it obviously in the hardware world, as we've talked about. How resilient to that is this technology? Is it more resilient?
I think overall, yes, but I've seen some providers that you could whisper and their stacks will blow over. We've heard it from some of their engineers that have left. There are some tech that I would not touch that is providing this type of capability. But I think overall, as long as you have confidence in the availability of the cloud infrastructure that you're putting this in, you kind of push to a multi-geographic cloud infrastructure as well to increase redundancy, you're going to be in a better spot. It's all trade-offs, right? Hardware fans die, right? Router goes down, right? Like hardware has problems, software has problems. All these things have their trade-offs, but I think with software, you can significantly spread out your risk from an availability and a redundancy and then a recovery standpoint, that it makes a lot of sense to move to this versus staying on a hardware approach.
Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Gary. Yeah, so I'm gonna get you to blend your two worlds on the vCISO and the MSP and the microsegmentation piece. How does microsegmentation fit into risk assessments and client roadmaps?
Yeah, so I'm big on mapping any product or technology or capability that you're looking at installing to controls, actually specifically the CIS controls. Like I want to know definitively when I install this thing, what can I turn around and say, all right, in CIS 8.1, what can I say I'm doing? Or in NIST, what can I say I'm doing, right? I will, because of one of the things that we built, I know a lot of software providers can't tell you that. They do not know what their product does when implemented to a control or standard. So, which is interesting because you talk to any CISO and they're not out there going, I want to reduce mean time to breach by 17%. No, they're going, I'm telling my board how I built a program aligned to NIST. Right. So if I'm a leader in an organization, whether it's a full-time CISO or a vCISO, and I'm building my cyber program aligned to standards, I'm looking at what am I doing around controls. And this isn't compliance, this is just controls and standards and framework. So I should be looking for products and solutions that align to what those are. So I know I have coverage and I know where my gaps are. Yet it's incredibly difficult to actually find out, hey, if I install this EDR, what controls can I say are now met? Hey, if I implement this backup solution, what controls can I say are met? And this goes on with most products. I spent the last 5 years talking with hundreds and hundreds of vendors, and all of them are like, yeah, we don't know actually which controls a client would say they meet when they implement our solution. I know that now because I've been mapping it for 5 years with all this stuff, and specifically to CIS, because that's how leaders build programs. And I'm like, well, so that's where kind of the worlds meet. The reason I got into microsegmentation was because that approach allowed me to look at my entire client base, hundreds of clients, and go, which controls are predominantly missing out of all of these mid-sized clients and small and mid-sized clients? And it happens to be all the CIS controls that are lined up to what you would expect out of a microsegmentation approach, or what software-defined networking can actually do. So I know there's a lot of plugs there for Phyllis, but like, it's public how much I love, NIST and CIS and like what we're doing with controls and that approach. But like, that's how I came to that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought that company built on that technology if I didn't see the data that was like, these are gaps across everybody. And when you go talk to some of my peers who are CISOs at very large organizations, I just kind of, as we're, drinking a couple, beers, it's like, are you missing these types of controls? Oh yeah, we don't do those things at all. Or it's incredibly difficult to implement X, Y, and Z. And it turns out it's because they're still on hardware defined, networking type of approach. It's like, oh, interesting. So I feel like I've gotten the data. The thesis was right, and I'm backing it up both at an enterprise and a mid-size business standpoint. But yeah, that's that convergence. That's kind of how, because it doesn't make sense that those two things would go together. I'll acknowledge and meet anybody on that one. But that's how we came up with it. I was like, oh, interesting.
Brian, can I just interrupt just for a second?
Yeah.
Eric Monroe put in a question. He says, he said, at first, where is it here? We need cloud services to cooperate with ZTNA. So I asked him, can you expand on that? And he said, without access controls and real-time logs from cloud services, we can't manage access or alert to issues.
Oh yeah.
So what is your thoughts on his comment?
Yeah, I mean, SaaS, right? Or platform as a service, right? Those types of, or even just purely cloud, right? All of those things need to be factored in. There's not this software-defined networking isn't just replacing the on-prem world, right? It it has to expand into any access, whether it's your cloud infrastructure in AWS or Office 365 access, right? Email is the number one SaaS platform right in the world. How are we protecting and making sure access to that is managed in the same way? And that's what, when you think about this and where you need to implement microsegmentation and what type of solutions you're going to do to enable that, that needs to be part of the conversation. Because if you're not doing that, you're ignoring. It's like when a CISO is like, "Hey, tell me about your the security of your environment." You do everything you tell them, and you're like, "Cool." But does that include the dev environment over there with all those systems? They're like, "Oh no, actually, that I wasn't telling you the security posture of the dev environment." Like you're missing an entire aspect of your organization. That's a problem. So yes, we need to have capabilities that go into anything that's cloud-based, just as it is on-prem. Because look, the cloud's just somebody else's computer. It's just somewhere else, right? It needs to be, the access controls need to be addressed in the same way.
Eric, you know too much about this. I want you to know less about this and sell more, please.
What are you doing on a podcast? Get out there and sell, right?
Exactly.
No, he's working hard. I know that. Chris, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Tell us how MSPs can make money. And is this a monthly deal that they can make money on? Is it more of a consulting, combination of both?
Yeah, I think so. The guys that we've talked to and what I'm seeing, even with competitive platforms and just who's out there with these products, is it can be a monthly service, right? Because you can do things via endpoint, right? You can charge per endpoint where you're doing this. You also can wrap a professional service and a managed service behind it, because now you're managing the network essentially, right? So transition away from managing firewalls to managing the network as a whole, right? That should be right up any MSP's alley. I think you can price it better instead of doing the whole throughput, or I always hated paying for things via throughput or all that. You can do it by endpoint, right? Oh, you got 50 employees. That's easy to do that calculation. What's your per endpoint? Per month, boom, there it goes. So how you make money is you're able to, I think, better wrap what the costs are, because clients want better ways to forecast what's this going to cost me, right? If I go from 50 to 60 or 100 employees, I can already forecast what my costs are going to be now to grow with this MSP. Clients love one thing I always loved about our model with vCISO is giving clients the ability to do that. So
can you give a ballpark in general, not an exact, but can you give a ballpark on what like the cost per user is for something?
We've seen, basically between 50 and 100 per user per year, right? To now manage this. But think about what you're abstracting. VPNs, so there's that cost goes out the window. You've got other endpoint technologies potentially and access controls that, might be used. So you remove those costs. If you remove the tools that are, overlapping, this becomes kind of a no-brainer for MSPs to start providing.
Yeah. What I would say is, it is at this point where we are, Andrew, what we've seen, $4 to $6 a seat per month it's not an easy thing. It's a heavy lift to bring something like that where MSPs are today into their stack. And that's what we keep running into. You know what I mean? When we're trying to solve these problems over the years. Are you with me on this, Andrew?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think in general, and again, to Brian's, in fairness to Brian, this is a little bit different on the, identifying and more on the detecting area, which is typically where we see those, Gare. But it's hard. It's a heavy lift.
We got to charge $15 a seat more to keep the 65% gross margin. And I think it's the right thing to do, but there's probably other right things too. This is why we lag behind. Brian, you're getting to the core of why this commercial model makes it harder for us to secure our customers than some other segments.
I think
Chris, you're with me, right, Chris?
Yeah, I just think that if there's something they're replacing, that may make it easier, right? Because
Yeah, I agree.
historically, it's been an add-on.
Right.
This could be somewhat of a replacement and maybe a small upgrade.
Yeah. You've got the replacement, what you're removing out of you're removing hardware from the environment, right? So what's your costs there, the maintenance fees, pro services that potentially go along with that? What are the support costs for all of that? You're also now able to, and again, you can talk to your clients and convince them of the flexibility they now have because they're using this to expand. I think the other thing is where we see tools that can do more than just microsegmentation. Are they multifaceted solutions? Can we get more out of this than just the one thing? Also, look, like I said in the beginning, this is not day one. This is not the thing that you lead with, right? You're not going like, hey, we're selling microsegmentation. You need a customer that like really is a little bit more mature. I don't think this is like your basic intro package type of add-on, but it's going to be, I think, in more demand over time, and if not by clients because of what they're seeing happen, but I think by regulation, and also your clients' customers. Those are the guys that I see. Those guys pushing clients more than regulation is clients' customers.
I know we're over, but Gary, then how does that play with everyone has to have the same services though? I mean, is it possible to roll stuff out like the way you?
I mean, look, today MSPs, they deal in some verticals, so they have a package, and that base package should be everything you think is the minimum that every customer should have. Then there might be customers and segments that are in business that require some other enhancements and that you would include. I always like to package it rather than having just as a one-off. Maybe this is part of two other things, right? That make the enhanced package for $40 a seat or something. But we always got to think, Phyllis, about what's the commercial model on this? How do we make it easy? How do we package it? How can we have a conversation that's a no-brainer with customers to get there?
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, thanks.
Good. This is really good, Brian.
Yeah, Brian, you did an excellent job. Really beneficial to our audience. I'm excited to get this out on podcast so more people can hear it. And love to have you back on.
I would love to.
Other stuff. Gary, welcome back. Hope we have you for a few weeks, or might see you in 26. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Like I have DattoCon and peer meetings coming up in October.
No, I know.
But other than that, I stay busy, Andrew.
I know you do. I know. Awesome seeing you, Phyllis. Chris, thanks for filling in. Everybody, make it a great week. We'll see you soon. Take care.